Hi, friends. We are here to talk about the season premiere of season 2 of Summer House Martha's Vineyard, which was one of the first shows that I reviewed when I started this channel almost a year ago. So it's crazy that we are back here already. This premiere was so super good. I don't if you guys weren't here last season, I was really trying to get my footing for a while in the first couple episodes because I've never watched Summer House. What made me watch it was obviously an all black cast. So I'm like, I want to support, and I just started my channel. So I was really trying to understand the mechanics of a Summer House show and what was supposed to be happening, and then there were just so many characters. But I ended up really enjoying it, and the way that they came back this season, I just thought was amazing. So, I mean, I have 100,000 notes, so let's get into it. I really like the beginning thing where Jasmine is giving like a kind of like a play-by-play of what happened after they filmed last season, and then kind of where they are now, like what's going to happen in terms of storylines. I was saying I hope that this isn't like the gist of the storylines because I don't want it to be too predictable, but she only talked for like 3 seconds, and there are 500 cast members, and they're there for 2 weeks, so there's obviously going to be 100,000 more things that are going to happen, and we learned a lot in this episode alone, so clearly not. The most interesting thing that she told us, though, was that she and Jordan barely spoke since last summer, but Jordan's cool with everybody else. And I immediately felt like, before I knew any information, because I haven't even heard this before, I hadn't even thought about it, I immediately assumed that it's probably because Jordan joined in on the social media side of things, meaning last season, a lot of people, including myself, had a hard time warming up to Jasmine because she was just a lot. However, I think that there's a distinction between being a lot and doing a lot and kind of being annoying versus being a bad person or a bad friend. And I think that Jordan took what the general public had to say about not really rocking with Jasmine at the time and ran with that, and now she's trying to justify it and act like Jasmine was not a good friend to her. But we're going to jump into that a little bit more. Aside from that, I mean, they had a little bit of an intro, which I don't know that they had last season, so that's just a small question that I had. I'm like, is the budget upping? They also have a new house. Again, I'm not familiar with Summer House, so is this something that they do on all of them? Like, they do new houses each season, and I'm wondering, like, why a new house? But this one felt a little bit more elevated, and it was nice. I think the layout of the house last year was really nice, and pretty much everybody had their own room, so I think that worked out. Whereas here, there are only rooms upstairs for the ladies and for Preston, and then the other guys are downstairs on like bunk beds, which honestly would have pissed me off. I don't know that would have made a big deal about it because who cares? And they're only there for 2 weeks. And typically, if I go on a trip, I'll sleep anywhere. I'm there to have a good time. But still, like, it's a stark difference between last year and this year where we get to see everybody separated. And we get those little clips of, like, maybe Amir's butt being out or something like that. Like, we probably won't get that in a shared room. But, I'm not asking for it. I'm just saying. So it's interesting when they're coming in that Bria and Jasmine seem to be getting along pretty well. Even though later on when they went to get the crabs with Preston, Bria didn't know how old Jasmine was. So it brings me back to a lot of questions I had last season of, I understand that they worked at the Playboy Club, but it's like, what was the level of friendship before you guys came here? Because you guys don't even know how old each other are. So, or is. I don't know if I formulated that correctly, but we move on. And as they're arriving, Jordan is arriving with Summer, who I didn't really clock what their relationship was last season to compare. But Jasmine is saying, they're really close this season. And Summer is asking Jordan in the car if she's excited to talk to Jasmine, and Jordan's like, no. But she doesn't give any type of justification or reason for that. In her confessional, though, she's saying that she felt like last season Jasmine was acting out of character and acting weird and being inauthentic, and so that led her to not be able to trust her. She didn't know if she was a trustworthy friend. I don't think those two go together. And the only thing that really tied Jordan into the way that Jasmine was acting last season, to Jordan's credit, is that Jasmine was being very pushy about, like, oh, there any guys here that you want to date, and acting like, Jordan basically had to be in a relationship for their friendship to keep moving forward, I guess. Jasmine was very weird about that, but that's not a reason to end a friendship or be weird with somebody, or not even to have a conversation with them, because clearly we know that she hasn't had a conversation with Jasmine about this. So I say all that to say Jordan's coming with some bullshit. And I also think about it in terms of, because like I said, I was really thinking like, who are these characters and what's supposed to be happening with this show, like what typically happens. And I did notice, I haven't watched it, but I did notice that Jordan ended up on the Winter House cast, and I don't know how that works. I want like, but it seems like there's a compilation of different summer house peoples from different areas or whatever, and then they come together for a winter house. That's what it looked like to me, but I've never watched the show. It just looked at that from casting. And Jordan, if I'm not incorrect, was the only one from Martha's Vineyard on there. So I'm like, oh, okay. Like when I saw that, I was like, okay, Jordan's the TV girl. Like that's going to be her bop. And so when I saw what was happening now with Jasmine, I'm like, this feels like TV girl behavior. I don't really know how to like explain that better, but it just seems like Jordan's more of a TV personality to me. Jasmine then talks about, the absence of Silas, which I don't think anybody's upset with. No shade, Silas, but you just, as much as Jasmine was a problem last season, like he quadrupled that. But anyway, he's not here, and Jasmine briefly explains that she and Silas had a rough year. Of course, the flashbacks are going to be to what happened on last season, but I'm interested to know maybe what was the aftermath of that, like what happened behind the scenes maybe. But I don't know if you get that on these summer house type of shows. And she explains that he's been deployed because he's in the military and he'll be gone for 10 months. She does not talk about, we learned in socials that Jasmine was pregnant, so I'm wondering when this is going to come up on the show. But as of right now, it's just speculation because Jasmine says she's not drinking. So, and she's not necessarily showing. So, but the people are wondering. So, I don't know when it's going to come up. We learned that Summer has a friend coming, which I thought was interesting because I'm like, Summer didn't play a huge role last season. I did really like Summer, honestly. Aside from the issue at the end with Bria, I did really enjoy her, but I didn't think she played a huge role to be somebody bringing a friend. So, but I was just wondering, like, what type of friend is this going to be? And it turned out to be the girl Noelle, who I guess we'll talk about when we get to it, but I thoroughly enjoyed her. Was it Noelle? I also noted that Shanice and Bria seem like they're in a better place. They obviously had a weird instance last season where, Shanice was naked in the pool with Simon, and there was a lot of discourse because Bria is somebody that's very dramatic, so people automatically are adverse to her and act like she does everything wrong, but we'll get into that later. But she definitely was not wrong in that situation. I'm going to bring it back because I still feel so passionate about it. And I think that I'm still irritated with Shanice from last season, but I'm trying to keep an open mind. They seem like they're in a good place, and we learned that Shanice is going to be there the entire 2 weeks, whereas, last time she was only there a little bit and she caused a lot of chaos. But I'm trying to be open to Shanice. I really am. We're seeing a lot of energy from Alex. I liked Alex last season too, just because I felt like there was so much going on, and Alex kind of felt like, as I explained last season, he just felt like he was very sure of himself and he knew what was going on with himself and his yeses and his nos, and he was very grounded even amongst the chaos and even when the chaos would come to him. And we're going to see even in this first episode at a very heightened stage that still remains true, at least in my analysis. But it was interesting to see him come back, and he was driving and he was on the phone with, I think it was Amir, and even when he came in the house, like he just has so much energy, and I'm like, okay, this is different. But then as he's arriving, we see Shanice and Summer in the kitchen, and they're like shading Alex and they're calling him weird. And Jordan seems to kind of be like joining in on that conversation a little bit. So I'm like, well, what makes him weird? Because that's a strong word. Like in the 2020 of the four, like and what the millennials have going on and how we chat. Like if you call somebody weird, that's a big thing. And so I mean, I would have to agree that Alex is a little bit different from the rest of them just because he has this kind of like mysterious things to him as it would show on camera. Like you just didn't really learn that much about him last season. So when you hear weird, you start to wonder like, okay, well, what is it? Like, what did he do? And then especially because, I mean, we had this cliffhanger of like what may have happened with him in Summer. They seem like they connected, last season, and now she's calling him weird. So you would just think that like, oh, he must have actually done something weird. And so at this point, Summer kind of vaguely says, that they hung out after, they filmed last season. And, now she's not even trying to speak to him. Like, he came in the kitchen, he was like, "What's up, Summer?" And she didn't even speak from what we saw on camera. And so I'm like, what is going on here? Preston shows up. I ended up enjoying Preston a lot last season. At first, I felt like I was getting annoyed with him with like because he came off a little preachy, but then I came back on it. I'm like, it seems like he's being produced as preachy, and maybe they're trying to affect that he's annoying, but he's not necessarily annoying. And then I listened to a little bit more of what he had to say last season, and he seemed a little more grounded as well, kind of like Alex. So I did like Preston, so I said all that to say I'm excited to see him, and I like his confessional looks with his hats. I have some of those hats as well. I thought it was funny to see him get like that side room and not be downstairs with the guys. And I'm like, oh, I would hope, like, if I was there, that I would be as fortunate because, oh my God. And that room had a bathroom. And I don't know it was him, but somebody acknowledged that they had a trip to Jamaica and not everybody was invited. I believe it was 4 of them. And I just honestly did not clock who was on the trip. But Preston was in there and Jasmine was not. And so we're already getting this narrative of, dynamics in the group, which is so super fun. Like, that's why you watch group shows like this, because you want to get the dynamics of everybody. We're getting so much, and we're getting something that I didn't necessarily expect, but it's very realistic. Like, you got this group of, I don't even know how many of them it is. I'll just say 9, throw a number out there. And there are pockets of them hanging out and pockets of them that are not. So that's interesting. I want to know the tea. So Noelle shows up. I automatically think she's just so gorgeous, honestly. And we learned that Summer met her because Summer is dating Noelle's roommate, who I assume is a male. And not that anything's wrong with it, but I always just get interested hearing that males are rooming with females, I guess. Especially if the male is straight. Like, I just wonder what that dynamic is just because I don't know anything about it. That's all. I've roomed with a female before, and I'm not saying female, and I know that the word female can be, dang, what's the word? Some women don't like the word female, but I'm saying female conversely to male. Like, that's how I'm saying it. I'm not calling women female. So now Summer, Jasmine, and Shanice are in the kitchen still kikiing. And I think Jasmine posed the question of like, well, what do you guys think about Amir's girlfriend? Because I think we learned during last season that Amir had a girlfriend. Because we were kind of watching the Amir and Jordan thing play out. And then the internet was like, well, it ain't going nowhere, y'all, because he got a girlfriend. So, Jasmine asks, what do y'all think? And Summer says she's a little standoffish. It was either Summer or Shanice. So I'm like, Summer got a lot of opinions this season. And I don't mind, but I want to know what they're rooted in. We get more of Summer then talking about this Alex thing. And she said essentially, again, they were hanging out. She lives in LA. He lives in New York. And when they would be in each other's respective cities, they would hang out. And she said basically last time she was in New York, where Alex lives, Alex acknowledged, that he was a F-boy and that he wanted to remain an F-boy. My notes just say LMAO because I think that's hilarious. And I don't know that I picked up that narrative from Alex last season, so I don't know. Alex came off as somebody that's very intentional. Not to say that if you're an F-boy you can't be intentional, but it felt more like mind, body, and spirit. My body is a temple and I don't really spread my energy like that. And I personally believe that when you have relations or relationships with other people, that's a sharing of energy, right? So I would assume that Alex doesn't necessarily have too many relations or relationships with people. But when I hear somebody say F-boy, that to me sounds like you get around, right? And that may not be his definition of it. I'm just saying I'm wondering where the distinction is and what he means by that. Going back to when Jasmine and Bria and Preston went to get the crabs or whatever, and people are arriving, they're in the car, and something that was interesting was when they were talking about the age thing that I brought up, Bria was saying, oh, I think she was saying she thought that she was older than Jasmine, whatever, one of those. And when Jasmine said her age, Preston was like, just so you know, that's older than this. Like that number's bigger than that number. And kind of throwing shade at Bria, kind of calling her dumb. And allegedly. And I thought back to last year, and I believe it was on Twitter and also maybe on Watch What Happens Live or like some type of interview. And I had clocked it because I felt very strongly last season that the general public and even some of the cast was inflating issues with Bria just because she was dramatic and can tend to be annoying. But I like Bria, and I feel like that those are just some characteristics that some people have. Some people are just a lot and annoying, and they're not everybody's taste. But that doesn't mean that everything that they do is wrong. And I feel like people conflate the two, as I've already said, and make it seem like everything that Bria does is wrong. So I had paid particular attention last season to some of the stuff that Preston was saying. And I remember, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember word for word, but he essentially made it seem like he was of the opinion that Bria was very dramatic and kind of just made situations bigger than they need to be. And I didn't necessarily agree with that, but I was just wondering where that was coming from, because while we were getting a lot of that perspective on the show, I don't feel like we got a lot of that from Preston. So I didn't really know where Preston stood with Bria. And so just from seeing what he would tweet, and I think what he may have said in an interview, but definitely Twitter, it felt like to me he was a little adverse to Bria. So in this episode, hearing that exchange and Bria kind of highlighting it and saying, Preston act like, I don't know, we got a bone to pick. Like, Preston act like he has a problem with me. I'm like, I'm glad she brought that up because I kind of felt like that as well. Like, it kind of feels almost a little bit passive aggressive, but I don't know. Like, I'm not to the bottom of it just yet. We then learned while they're in the car that Preston's father had recently passed and that the funeral was coming up while they were there, but that he didn't really have a close relationship with his father. They had a lot of issues, and he and his sister, and it may have been someone else, so I apologize if I forgot, they basically got ousted by his father's side of the family and uninvited from the funeral. And you could see that he was very hurt by that. And obviously relationships with parents, especially when they're estranged, can be very not the word difficult, but complex is the word I'm looking for. So it's nice to see him open up about that, and it gives us more perspective into who Preston is in this very large cast. In note, we're back to Jasmine being Jasmine, and it's annoying, but I'm giving her a pass as it relates to Jordan, but we're going to get there, like I said. But they're in the kitchen, and Jasmine is asking Noelle, like, hey girl, have you peeped anybody yet? And she did say that, she thought Alex was cute and she had seen him around Brooklyn before. And Summer's like, not Summer, she's friends with Summer. So I guess Summer had given her the okay to go and mess around with Alex if she wanted to, or get to know Alex or whatever the heck. And Shanice is like, I think that Noelle needs to have a little bit of a deeper conversation with Summer to really know what's going on there. So yeah, that's interesting because based on the way that Summer's acting, it's weird that she would give her friend the pass to go talk to Alex. We're now at dinner, and Jordan is immediately getting on my nerves. We're back. Welcome back, season 2. And she brings up this event that Alex had in New York where he did not invite everybody. Again, I'm not clear on who was on the guest list, but the crux of the conversation was that he did not invite Jordan and he did not invite Summer. And without even hearing any details, I think that makes sense. I don't think that Jordan was the warmest to Alex last season. I think that she was honestly a little bit weird to Alex. I can understand certain stuff that kind of turned her off as it pertained to Alex last season, but similar to how she's treating the stuff with Jasmine, I think Jordan makes things bigger than they need to be. Honestly, like, I think that she is a lot of what they say about Bria. But basically, Alex explains it as, it's this music event that he has been having in New York for the past 4 years. He obviously has his own organization. He talked about this last season, and he said there's a subscription list, and these are the people that get invited. It's more of an intimate event. He says basically he didn't invite Summer. He didn't realize that she was in New York, whoop the bam, whatever. And Summer's like, well, I want to call BS on that. She's very, I hate to use the word emotional, but that's the best word that I have. Like, she did seem very emotional about it, and I don't know, maybe if there was something else there affecting it. But they did have a lot of shots, somebody there had a lot of shots. I don't know who all had shots. I don't know if Summer had any shots, but she seemed a bit either emotional or inebriated or a combination of the two. But yeah, Summer explains briefly. We don't get a lot of detail, which is what it bothers me. Like, cause I'm nosy, and these stories are very juicy, so I want all the details. But it's just a lot of people, and it's not a lot of time. But she says briefly, that they were on a. There's so many they and them. It's like, who? Name these people, please. And she's like, they were on a group FaceTime the morning of the party, and Alex, I guess, noticed that Summer was in Jordan's living room, and Jordan lives in New York. So by, process of elimination, obviously Summer is in New York. But I'm also thinking like, but who cares? Because I mean, if it's the day of, then yeah, he probably isn't going to extend an invite. It wasn't pre-planned. He didn't know you were going to be there. And then outside of that, he didn't say it, but I can understand why he wouldn't invite, like I said, Jordan and Summer. I don't think that Jordan and him are cool. And I think Jordan said a lot of weird stuff about him and not kind things about him last season. If that's how she feels, that's how she feels. But you don't need to come to my event. And in Summer, they obviously had some type of, we still don't know the reasoning at this point, but they obviously had some type of situationship that didn't work out. So yeah, y'all are not invited. I don't get the issue. I don't know why Jordan even brought that up. Obviously to put the battery in Summer's back, and because she's a TV girl. Let's be real. So they then get to a point where they're saying, Bria was the only one that got a personal invite. I don't know why that matters. And it seems like Bria's jumping in just to the defense of Alex. And she says, she's like, y'all, it's not even like that. Like, at the end of the day, other people have had events where people would have not been invited. And it sounded like, not enough detail, like I said, but it sounded like they were talking about a party that Bria had, and I guess Summer didn't come, and she's like, well, I live in LA, and they were getting heated. And Preston, I didn't like this part. It felt like Preston kind of inserted himself into that. Yes, he was on the side and just kind of huffing and puffing, but they're at a table and they're having a conversation, and it's literally Summer, Preston, Bria. So Bria witnesses it, and she's like, Preston, if you have a problem and you want me to go, just say that. You know what I'm saying? I don't find any fault in Bria calling that out. It almost kind of felt like Preston was upset that she called it out, and he's like, I wasn't even talking to you. But they're having a conversation, a conflict, and you're inserting your what's going on here type of stuff. And I didn't understand that, because then he's trying to make it a thing of like, I hate how everything has to become an issue. And then even when Bria removes herself from the table, he's throwing stuff in her face from last season. It seems like they do a lot of social media. He's throwing stuff in her face from last season where people were chastising her as well in the general public, like, oh, she sat in her room for 2 days and she was being dramatic, and, oh, are you gonna go cry now? Just weird stuff, to then turn around and say like, I love Bria and we talk every day. And I'm like, you couldn't possibly. If you're throwing jabs at her to that level, like, that's kind of insane. Like, you went for the jugular pretty immediately. Y'all definitely are not friends. And I also just thought that was weird, because Summer is the one being melodramatic at the table, and Jordan is the one that broached the conversation. This was the conversation that was happening before Bria even said anything. So I just thought it was so weird that Preston then makes Bria the issue. And then even when she came back, I appreciate that Shanice, who I'm still trying to fill out, went to check on her friend, and they got her to come back downstairs, and she apologized to Preston. He apologized back. They say, I love you, whatever, da-da-da. They sit down, still don't think they're friends. But still, the conversation keeps going, and it honestly escalates and gets worse. And Preston has nothing to say about that. I just didn't understand that. And then similarly, Amir did the same thing. Like, he ran into the house and he was just like, Bria makes everything so dramatic, or whatever the hell he said. He did something similar last season. And I'm like, why does Bria always have to be the issue? Like, if you have an issue with Bria being annoying or being dramatic or doing too much, that can be separated from this instance, because she's not wrong here. She didn't do anything. Like, people that annoy you, you have to stop allowing that to make you treat them differently. If you don't necessarily like that person is annoying, you don't like that person, and you need to leave that person alone. Not act like you're friends with them, and then as soon as a conflict happens, you pointing the finger at them all the time because they're annoying and it must be them. That's so sandbox. And it's so passive aggressive. So as I stated, they go through all of that. Summer then brings it back up. She's like, I want to get back to the Alex thing, because she's like, I'm not understanding. And somebody was even like, well, he gave you an answer. And she's like, but I think that he's lying. And it's like, okay, but that's not table talk. Like, girl, we can't play Inspector Gadget here. Like, we can't play Clue. It is what it is. Like, he said it. You don't agree with it. Let's move on. Like, I don't understand what the issue is. But then we finally get to the crux of the issue. So the real issue is Summer says, well, you didn't invite the person that lives in New York, obviously gesturing to Jordan. And she says immediately after, with no forethought, no pausing, no nothing. She's like, you didn't even invite the person that you've been inside of. And when I tell you, all my limbs went up into the air, I think that I touched the ceiling. And it could have been the Sunday Funday that I had like beforehand, but that took me, honey. Like, I think I went around the room like this. And it was so hilarious seeing everybody's reaction, especially Noelle. And then it's even more interesting to learn that everybody even knew about it, except for Jasmine, because they haven't been rocking with Jasmine. But everybody already knew about it. So, and mostly the guys were saying they knew about it. So I'm like, oh, Alex must have told them. But then they made it a little bit clear later Alex made it a little bit clear that that's private for him and he wouldn't be telling anybody about it. The reason that everybody knows is because of Summer. And I love how Alex pivots this conversation and says, well, hey, like, I don't understand why the pot is calling the kettle black, because everybody's had situations, just like Bria was just saying, where they didn't invite people to stuff. And he's like, I've been to several events where Jasmine was not invited. And they show at least 3 to 4 pictures of events where Jasmine was not invited, including the trip to Jamaica. And I like that Jasmine got a chance to speak up for herself and say, yeah, I'm not understanding where this distance is coming from. But now nobody really has anything to say. I like that Jasmine clocked the tea in the confessional and was like, most of y'all really wouldn't even know each other if it wasn't for me. But at this point, they end the dinner and everybody's going to bed. Summer is still talking about it to Jordan. We can hear over the mic. And I'm just like, I'm at the point now, like, when I see Alex in the episode, I cannot help but laugh because, like, the way that he is just kind of standing in his truth and just being kind of, like, forthcoming. And he even says, like, Summer's trying to get a reaction out of me, but I'm like, that's not the type of guy that I am. I'm not going to let her get me riled up. Like, I was like, he is eating it. Like, that's just truly how I felt. Finally, we get to the boat day, and we learn that this is the same day as Preston's father's funeral. And, you know, he's saying that he's really happy to be there with the group. And it's nice to see them on a boat day, because we didn't get a boat day last season. We didn't get anything like that. Just a lot of, like, I think, like, last season was, like, off-season in Martha's Vineyard. Like, places like that in the Hamptons, they have their, like, in-season time. And I believe that last season people were saying that it wasn't really popping in Martha's Vineyard while they were there. And now they're there, and it's like, you know, they can do stuff for real. So Jasmine, you know, wants to have this conversation now with Jordan on the boat. Jordan's not trying to have the conversation, obviously, because she doesn't have any real justification. And without hearing anything, I knew this. But now they're having the conversation, and Jordan is explaining, like she did in the confessional, that, you know, these things that Jasmine did last season led her to mistrust. And Jasmine even says, like, well, that doesn't really have anything to do with me. And then if you did have an issue with me and I'm your friend, then you could have just came to me and had that conversation. And then we can think back to the end of last season where when Jasmine finally humanized herself and won a lot of people over, when she had that breakdown at the restaurant when Simon was there, and she's like, you know, I haven't been being myself, and it's been an adjustment getting married and being around my single friends. Like, she acknowledged very fully last season that she was not being herself. So now for Jordan to try to use that and weaponize that and say, well, that's why I can't be your friend, it doesn't even make any sense. And because that didn't work, she goes further and says, you know, she was having a conversation with Jasmine and Silas, and there was a text where she asked, how do we move forward? And Jasmine didn't respond. And Jasmine's like, girl, this one text message, she's like, I have several calls outgoing to Jordan where she hasn't answered. Like, come on now, be for real. And it's just abundantly clear where it had already been clear. It's abundantly clear now that Jordan is making things up. So at this point, something that I never thought that I would say, I'm Team Jasmine. And like I said, I like that Jasmine clocked in and she's like, I'm not responsible for this shift. And I completely agree with her. And I also like her saying, you know, I'm sitting here, I'm listening, I'm sharing, I'm being open, and I'm not getting anything from Jordan. And she's 100% right. Alex and Summer also talk on the boat, which I talked about earlier, where Alex gives us more context that, he wanted this to be private. And the only reason that everybody knows, we learn, is because they were hanging out and Summer sent a picture of him to somebody. I forgot who it was. And that's weird. Like, again, now I've said how Jordan was actually being weird, and now I'm actually seeing where Summer was being weird. So I'm still not understanding where's the weirdness with Alex. I'm now feeling like, without any further context, I could be wrong, but it feels like Alex is weird because he's not choosing to move how y'all want him to move. And even though y'all act weird towards him, he didn't invite y'all to his event. Like, he's not falling into the BS with y'all. And that's what makes him weird, that he's not participating in your BS. But all in all, I'm glad that we got closure on this situation just in episode 1, because Summer acknowledges that she has big expectations for Alex. And I can understand, like, that's relatable. Like, yeah, you're messing around with somebody and you can acknowledge that they're an F-boy and she's acting like she's okay with that, but they obviously were spending time together doing what, who knows. But in spending time with somebody, sometimes the gears can get mixed and you can start having different expectations. And she said, like, I had love for you, and Alex is like, that's a lot. And, she's like, obviously, I've had bigger expectations for you to do stuff that probably were unreasonable and I shouldn't have had. And she apologizes. So, again, to her credit, like, that's relatable and I understand. But I don't think it's fair then to turn that and be like, well, you're being weird, or you did this, you did this. Like, they were definitely, without further information, like I said, I could be wrong, but it felt like they were gaslighting Alex. And I don't see any proof that Alex has done anything wrong. But all in all, this was a really, really, really good premiere. And I'm excited to see the rest of the season and see what happens. What other mess do they have in store for us? So, see y'all in the next one.